Welcome into Rover Sports. This is the podcast, and it has been long overdue. It's me, it's Davey Horns, it's Friday night. We're excited for the weekend of football. Hopefully you guys can get out, see your friends, and enjoy a really nice November weekend. And I have Dave right here on the line. Dave, how's it going tonight?
It's freezing cold up here in New Jersey. It's getting even colder, but other than that, it's football season, so it's great. It's getting to the real stretch run.
And you know what? It's basketball season. And
it is basketball season.
And our show is sponsored by sweaters. No, I was thinking about going into a full-on read. You know it's cold outside, and our show is sponsored by some kind of sweatshirt company, but it would have been a perfect professional read right there to start the show off.
I thought you were going to shock me and tell me you had a sponsor.
You were getting ready. I put
I
the
was
radio
ready.
voice on, and a lot of people are surprised in person when I meet them, and they're like, wow, you sound totally different. I wouldn't have imagined you.
So, what's the first topic?
So anyway, last night, let's just talk about last night. It is getting cold out. It's November, and you went to a really fun game on FS1. A lot of people were watching the football game, but Miles Powell, his statistics didn't do him justice. I thought he really shot the ball well. That 3-point, I think he had that and 3-point play, and then he must have missed the free throw. I only caught the end of the game. Just quickly talk about how fantastic it was to see Tom Izzo's team in person, and that's one of the best environments that the Prudential Center is going to have.
Yeah, it was a great night. Seton Hall versus Michigan State. You had two top 15 teams. Seton Hall is ranked 12, so you'd call two top 12 teams. Michigan State's ranked 3. A lot of question marks. Could Seton Hall compete coming in? The kid Miles Powell, who had 37, had a bummed ankle. For those who don't know, a lot of question whether he was going to play or not coming into the game. He put on an absolute show. He looked a little bit, from someone who's watched him for the last 4 years, not every game at home, but just even from afar as a Seton Hall fan, didn't necessarily have the explosiveness, but it was one of those true gutty performances that will kind of go unnoticed because of the loss. It was definitely a March-like performance from Powell where he puts up 37 points. The rest of the team wasn't performing. He put the team on his back. This Michigan State team has so many different weapons. They are so efficient. Cassius Winston is great. They had a kid who hadn't scored all year, go like 7 for 7, score 18 points, hits 5 threes. A big guy, just a true team in Michigan State. Tom Izzo, they never go away. They got down 5 with less than a minute to go. Back-to-back threes, go up 1. Beautiful game. Michigan State ends up edging it out. It was just all in all a great game. I don't know what more to say. Both teams fought hard, and it's cliche, but there were no losers last night in theory. Seton Hall, you knew that they were for real by the end of the game, that they are going to be a contender. They probably are the best team in the Big East, especially after what you saw Villanova go through the other day. And they're not going to be hanging their heads. Michigan State's not going to be hanging their heads because they won the game. Is what it is.
Yeah,
great game.
I thought that really for Michigan State as a program, them beating Duke was a shocker. They had a really easy run last year to the Final Four. But I also think that them losing with Jaren Jackson, Tom Izzo's a really great basketball coach, but I want to see Tom Izzo. I think he only has one national championship now. How many championship games was he in? I know he lost to North Carolina big at Ford Field back in 2008. I'm trying to think if he got back to another championship game The guy is great at getting the Final Fours. I just want to see if Michigan State, and actually the Big Ten Conference, they haven't won a championship in like 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, when you get down to it sometimes, I mean, the thing about the Big Ten, like, ever since the time that really Indiana has kind of de-emerged as one of the real blue bloods in college basketball, if that makes sense. Like, they used to be, but now they really aren't, no matter what anyone tries to really justify it as, They don't really have a natural power in the conference. I mean, Michigan is starting to not beeline left, but had been starting to become that real blue blood. Like, every year they're right there. So they've kind of been lacking every few years. You have like Ohio State became good, obviously, with Greg Oden for a year, and then, with Sullinger and then Kraft. With the thing about Michigan State, it's kind of like the one program over the last 20 years that's kind of been there all along. The Big Ten, it goes up and down, up and down. There's no program that necessarily sustains itself over a 10-year span other than Michigan State. And the thing about Michigan State is a lot of times, like even the Jaren Jackson year, they go out and they don't really have a ton of top-end talent, most of these teams. And, where, Kentucky has top-end talent. Kansas has top-end talent. Obviously, Duke, North Carolina.
Yeah.
They have the top-end talent. And a lot of it's luck. And, like even Louisville under Pitino when they won their championship, they have kind of, with Pitino, they've been there for the previous 10, 15 years, if that makes sense. So it takes a lot more than just one or two good years most of the time to really build a championship. And even when you can say, well, Kentucky, they bring in these kids one and done each year. Duke, they do this stuff. But still, it's over time. It's a culture. And usually these teams even have one, maybe two guys returning that have championship pedigrees. So it's tough, It's not the easiest thing just to say win a championship.
It's definitely tough because you look at the teams like at Duke that were in the tournament, and they had a lot of talent last year. I think Duke's problem has been its defense, but Roy Williams has really done a great job in the tournament. I think he might be one of the only coaches that is not known to choke in the tournaments, and the longer you go around, the more you're going to get criticized for the tournament success. And even like Bill Self in the Elite Eights is something that still kind of haunts him. And I think that Villanova has the right mix of kids. You need some veterans, like grad transfers like Eric Paschal to come in and help you out. And then sometimes maybe your conference can prepare you. But I guess you need an alpha player. And looking at Texas Tech last year, I mean, Jarrett Culver was the superstar. He was maybe the best player in that tournament. And then you also had that kid Matt Mooney who came from South Dakota, and that was a tremendous pickup for. That was just Matt Mooney's. It's so rare to find a Matt Mooney, just a guy that's clutch, that's going to lead your team. And a lot of it's just about defense and toughness. It's why you see Wichita do well. And it's just it's the NCAA tournament's just a beast in itself.
Yeah, I mean, we can once again, Texas Tech falls into that mold. And once again, a lot of these schools get close. And it doesn't mean that they couldn't have won the games or anything like that. But, Michigan got close a couple times. They got blown out by Villanova a few years ago. They had the game against Louisville a few years back in the championship where they weren't decently close.
Spike.
It's like, as I said.
Albright.
Yeah, well, like I said, though, you go back and you look at these schools, some of them, like Virginia, their coach, everything has been there for about 10 years. Everything has been in line, where it just seems like a lot of these teams that end up pulling out at the end of the day, something has been there for a long time, and it's molded together pretty much over the test of time. Villanova, it's been there forever at this point. Jay Wright, bunch of 4-year guys, you go, sorry, and you go on and on. It's just, you go down the line in that, and that's just kind of the way it works in college basketball. It seems like the things that have been there for the test of time will end up prevailing at the end of the day at the top.
We're going to go actually from college basketball. And this podcast, we're going to touch on a lot of subjects. We're going to wait until the actual weekend to start previewing a lot of the upcoming weekend, specifically the games. We do those on Saturday morning. But some of our most interesting off-air conversations have dealt with college football and these openings. And it was surprising to talk about a Florida State, and you're very connected to Florida and to Florida State. And you said that job was not an elite job, and I don't think I'm the only one that still thinks that Florida State is damn elite, that the recruiting base is ridiculous, that talent's going to pour in there, and that Willie Taggart was just so unprepared and he was just so terrible. I still think Florida State is a good job, but you have some interesting reasons why you think it is not that great of a job.
Well, I mean, first of all, Jimbo Fisher couldn't get out of there quick enough. Just let's look at Jimbo Fisher's last 2 years there. I mean, they weren't like great years. Jimbo's last year there, they literally were struggling to. They have to reschedule Louisiana Monroe from one of the Hurricane games after Jimbo had left to what was it, that conference championship weekend. They had to reschedule them from the first week when they had the Hurricane they couldn't play to make the bowl game. So let's not forget that about Florida State in Jimbo's last year. So in Jimbo's last year there, they were terrible. So do not forget that Willie Taggart was left a complete mess, and Willie Taggart made an even bigger mess of a complete mess. So I'm not sitting here trying to defend Willie Taggart either. That job is not, and when I repeat, it's not an elite job anymore. You could say, well, they had been good in 2013. I get that. They got very, very lucky. They took a guy that no one else really wanted, Jameis Winston, an elite quarterback, but Jameis Winston was begging to go to Alabama. Nick Saban wanted no part of it. Jameis Winston was begging Mac Brown to take him at Texas. Mac Brown wanted no part of Jameis Winston. Well, you know what? What's his name? Jimbo Fisher takes him and is better for it. And what happens? You get a national championship. You get rewarded very, very, very preciously. But the guy was a complete and utter, program changer in two different ways. One, on the football field, 100%. But two, everyone knew the baggage that this guy kept. So, he kind of got
Mac Brown, just to clarify, didn't want to touch Jameis because of the off the field concerns.
Yeah, from everything I understood as a Texas fan, Texas was Jameis's number one choice because Jameis idolized Vince Young, and Mac Brown absolutely did not want to touch him, which as a Texas fan drives me utterly insane when you look back at it. Believe me, don't get me wrong, I'm not happy about this, but that's all the rumor. Jameis Winston offered himself to Nick Saban, told Nick Saban he would walk on Alabama for 1 year to prove himself. Nick Saban wanted nothing to do with him. Mind you, this is a 5-star kid, wanted to walk on Alabama, wanted nothing to do with him. Now all the other schools they want him, he ends up at Florida State, okay? But either way, this kid, so you take Winston, you had a great team, and then after that point, even after the national championship year, they went undefeated by the skin of their teeth, right?
Yeah.
Every game they were bad, okay, but they end up winning, and then they eventually get the doors blown off of them against Oregon in the Rose Bowl in the semifinal of the playoff. Mm-hmm. And then from that point on, they've just kind of been this very slow decline until what you had Jimbo's last year weren't that good. Taggart the last 2 years, not that good. You say, well, why is that? Florida State, this great program, great history. As you said, great recruiting base. Well, when you think about Florida State's getting maybe they're the 5th or the 6th pick in Florida. And you're saying, well, how is that? There's only 3 good schools in Florida. I mean, Dave, that makes no sense. Well, okay, obviously the University of Florida is number 1 there. And then you start having Clemson. Clemson's a pick. More kids from Florida are any good? we'll go to Clemson. Wait, you got Alabama. Alabama comes in and takes all the good kids from Florida. Wait, you have Ohio State that comes in and just hand plucks the kids from Florida if they want them. Mm-hmm. Wait, oh yeah, I've got LSU. They're hand plucking kids from Florida. Wait, I've got Georgia coming in and hand plucking kids from Florida. So Florida State has now gotten to this point where they're not able to compete with Florida, certainly. And then they're not able to compete with these other bigger schools that are coming in and hand selecting the top talent out of Florida. So what are you now left with? Kind of like the secondary kid, the third kid, like the third choice kid, and that's where Florida is. What were you going to say?
Do you think that Florida State, and maybe I guess Nebraska, but on a lesser scale, do you think that the demise then of Florida State being elite is because of 24/7 sports and just the ability of like Ohio State to travel down and hold the satellite camps? Like, do you think it's because of the exposure of Huddle and 24/7 that now these kids just have so many more options that even in 2010 where Twitter was pretty new, do you think that like the advance of the internet has just killed Florida State?
Yes, I 110%. I wouldn't say it's 24/7 sports itself, but I agree with more. It's like the Twitter and the what's it called, the advance of the internet. Instagram, where literally you have coaches who will out of nowhere be sent a clip of a kid, from someone they know. Hey, check out this kid. And it's a minute clip on Instagram. Okay, that kid looks fast. Let's get some film on that kid. So the days of, just because 24/7 sports doesn't necessarily grade a kid. It's kind of like this argument I was having the other day with this kid Jefferson, right? LSU.
Yeah.
Well, LSU was pretty damn sure of him when they recruited him because I know the kid from the Shreveport area. The kid was a stud. And I'm just gonna give that example. Well, LSU was sure when they signed him of what he was going to be. They were raving about him on the signing day if you read the quotes, And once again, it's 24/7. They didn't quite pick it up, but but once again, it was the advancement of the internet. They had enough film. They were sure of it, and it kind of came to them.
You
so
know what,
yeah, you're right.
Florida is actually, I think, easier to like study the landscape because California is just such a huge state. Like, where Josh Allen is from in Fireball, where there's only like 2,000
Yeah, it's
people.
in the middle of nowhere. It's in Northern California, middle of nothing.
Yeah, so in the north, you can maybe find people in California. You can maybe find those gems, which is still like really fun as a coach to try to find the gems. But in Florida, though, I mean, every game is televised, and like the cities are still pretty concentrated.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's not all southern Florida and stuff like that, But there's so many state all-star games. There's so much exposure to football in Florida. There's so much resource put into football that, it is hard to have a kid completely fall through the cracks. I mean, they play football in the springtime there. Like the 7-on-7s are a full year thing for them. So the kids that fall through the cracks there are very few and far between. I mean, you always have a kid, there's no doubt about it. But
so let's talk about what guys would want this job. And the bad thing about the job that you're talking about is the recruiting's not the same, but even you alluded to the facilities problems, which we could continue to talk about. But right now, the coaches that are out there that might want – I'm doing a podcast, doing a show. Sorry about that. Got interrupted there for a quick second.
It's okay.
I was on a freaking roll, too. That's a shame. But
okay, back to the facilities.
The head coaches that would maybe want this Florida State job, and the reason it's kind of a hard job is you're always going to get, compared to Bowden, to Bobby Bowden, or to 30 years of greatness, even when I was a young kid, and now you have Deion Sanders, you have Lane. I'm trying to think of some of the other candidates, but maybe Bob Stoops, but you don't see a lot of coaches leaving their programs. There's not even that much. You can win big at a little school now, so I'm curious to see like what candidates are out there and what do you think's going to end up happening.
Well, I mean, from the things I have read, all right, Bob Stubbs not a candidate. The other thing is that Deion Sanders is not an actual candidate, So that's I'm more sure of Bob Stoops not being a candidate than Deion, but yeah, from everything I'm reading, is Bob Stoops is not coming to Tallahassee. Once again, I think it might also have to do with the fact that for a guy like that, not a good job for him to take. He's legendary coach. These guys all know the writing on the wall.
Yeah, you're never going to be able to kind of step into the shadow and win big. Now, the good thing is the ACC is not very good. And I still think that the recruiting, I still think you have Miami and Clemson. You mentioned North Carolina like becoming really good. I still think Florida State's going to be easier to recruit to. And I still think Florida State's going to I still think they are going to get talent. I really do. And I still think Florida State has a chance to be pretty good.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I would say 9 or 10 win. I would say like a 10-win season, maybe 11 wins. And so Deion is not a serious candidate there?
No, not from what I'm reading. I think the thing that you've got to start taking into account with Florida State is that because to get to 9 or 10 wins is not that easy in this sense. Once again, their recruiting base is Florida. They are not getting the top kids in Florida. You can say, well, the ACC is not that good. Well, yeah, you're just getting you're getting the same not as good kids as the rest of the ACC, and that's where this is becoming a real tricky job real quick,
Well, then it becomes, you got to coach them up. But the expectations of the fan base are so out of control then. They're probably super out of control.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, with the right schedule and the right year, you can win 10 games. I don't think it's a given that they're winning 10 games anymore, like in a year.
Yeah, this isn't just coming from me. I mean, Florida State people, they expect to hammer Miami. I think Miami's actually a much easier job because Miami has sucked for, I would say, maybe like 13, 14 years. Actually, maybe even longer, since like 2005. So Miami, they've gone through dark times. And when Mark Richt beat Notre Dame, they were damn near having a party in Miami.
Okay, and here's another thing about Miami compared to Florida State. Okay, when you say, well, you have a great recruiting base, at least Miami's kind of in the center of it. Like, they're at least where their school is, they're next to the big recruiting base where maybe you can just steal a kid here and there, if that makes sense.
Broward County,
maybe
Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, but also the Miami Central, Northeast Miami, all those schools, I mean, Florida State, don't forget this about Florida State. Just because it's in Florida, Florida State is as far away from the recruiting base as any of the schools in Florida. Gainesville is a lot closer to Miami than Florida State. Tallahassee is closer to Tuscaloosa than it is to Miami.
Have you been to Tallahassee?
Yes, I have. It's in the middle of nowhere.
I actually hear that Gainesville is more like southern than Tallahassee. Like, it feels more southern, actually.
Yeah, but Tallahassee is in the middle of nowhere. What I'm saying is there is no national recruiting base.
There, I've tried to fly there. It's impossible to get to.
Yeah, no, there is no – this is the other thing about Florida State. Now that Bobby Bowden is gone, now that Jimbo is gone, there is no allure with the head coach that is going to come in. You could say, well, if they bring in Deion Sanders, which I am reading is not a real thing, we'll see if that, I'd be shocked about it, It's like they're talking about like Mark Stoops, like PJ Fleck. Why would PJ Fleck leave?
Yeah.
It's like all these guys.
Stoops is a possibility. I've never been impressed with him at Kentucky. And he can use
what
a
I'm saying
scenery
is,
change. That's actually possible. That would be a terrible hire. actually. I
But
really
you're
think it'd
saying
be
it's
better.
a terrible hire, but tell me who else is taking this job that makes it a good
Well,
hire, you know?
Stoops hasn't even been dynamic in the SEC. At least, like James Franklin was the best Vanderbilt coach ever. I would say that you could still get. I would take a chance on a
Stoops
very
has been
young
the best
guy like a
Kentucky
Will
coach ever.
Healy, a Joe Brady, someone very, very young. Then I would take a chance on. A young coordinator. So
Like
I would
Joe
say
Brady,
Will Healy, I would say Joe Brady, Bill Clark from UAB. I mean, UAB's program was pretty much dead. Bill Clark brought it back to life. I still think that if Mike Norvell wanted to go to Florida State, he would be interested. I think the history and also moving up to the ACC, there's definitely guys that would take the job.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Brady is not like, you got to talk about realistic guys. They're going out and getting a head coach. School is not going to take a chance on, a guy who's not even an offensive coordinator.
I don't think that's that bad. I would rather have Joe Brady than Mark Stoops.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you also it's higher character board before the reality is you got is going to be able to recruit it, and I'll right now that Joe Brady is not going to be able to recruit the way that he's to be able to recruit next year and to save it in time. Whoever they hire is gotta be.
You know what? You might have an echo on your phone. You have an echo on your phone. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
Oh man, we got an echoing problem just recently. Should I try to call you back? Yeah, I got to try to call Dave back. We're talking right now about Florida State, about the possibilities of the hiring up there in North Florida, in the capital city of Tallahassee. We're talking a little college football. When I get Dave back on, we're going to try to talk about the playoff a little bit, and then we'll talk about some NFL storylines here before we head out. But I want to thank you guys so far for listening to Rover Sports, the podcast. I'm going to retitle this after the conclusion of the video. So we just had a little bit of a hiccup there. So we're getting Dave back on the line. Calling Dave back up, Davey Horns. And Dave, you're back. Let's hope it's better.
Yeah, I'm back. I don't know what happened. It sounded like it was just conking out on me. I don't know if internet connection or what. For
yourself or what?
It just sounded like all I heard was Joe Brady. It was like on repeat in my head. So I think it was like God just trying to pound Joe Brady's name into my head.
I hope we'll be all right, man. One day we'll make it to the big time and have studios producing this high-level podcast.
But basically going back to it, it's like I just don't think that you could, if you're Florida State, justify. If you're saying that Florida State is still an elite school, you don't go out and hire someone's offensive coordinator. That is not someone who's not even an offensive coordinator yet. That's something that goes out and does. Wake Forest goes out and does. That's something that
Arkansas,
the small schools, the Arkansas, they have to reach so far that they're going to go with a complete unknown commodity, and we don't even know if that guy can recruit.
Yeah. Dave, let's talk about the college. Let's talk about the college football playoff. We'll definitely get into these stories as they go along. With Arkansas, with Florida State. In the coming weeks, we are going to have some more concrete news, but it's always fun to talk about the upcoming openings. We had Alabama lose to LSU. I think that Alabama's defense did look shaky. There were a couple of plays that, down the stretch that Alabama needed to make. It's really like, if you were Alabama, would you rest Tua? And then do you think that beating Auburn is going to be good enough for Alabama to get into the playoff? And what do you think about Auburn? Do you think that Georgia will lose to Auburn this week? How do you see the SEC spots in the playoff shaking out?
Okay, let's put it this way. I think it's going to be very, very, very simple here. Okay, if Georgia loses to LSU in the championship game and Alabama beats Auburn and they win out, Alabama 100% will make. I say about 90% chance it makes the playoffs. I don't even think it's questionable, based on the fact that they were put at 5. I mean, there are a couple of other interesting scenarios now. Auburn, if they beat Georgia, all right, this weekend.
Yeah.
I think that Alabama versus Auburn game actually becomes a college football playoff eliminator game. And you say, well, how is that with Auburn with 2 losses? Auburn will have had the number 1 schedule, right? They'll basically, if Oregon wins the Pac-12, I'm telling you right now, if somehow Auburn were to beat Alabama and Georgia, I'm telling you right now, Auburn is going to be ranked ahead of any Pac-12 team. And then you look at what's it called? What's the next conference? The Big 12. You know, Baylor, Oklahoma. You know, that's not going to matter. Auburn could sneak their way into the playoff too, but I do believe
that's a very interesting argument. A 1-loss Oklahoma or an Auburn.
Yeah, I think Auburn will make it because I don't think you're not going BCS points. You're not going anything else. You know, you're going based on a committee that has always said we're going to take the 4 best teams, right? So you don't need a BCS opinion. You don't need this, that, the other thing. You need what's it called? You need people to say Auburn would be in. And I think it would actually be clear cut if they were to beat Georgia and what's their names? Alabama.
How about Utah winning the Pac-12 because they didn't have to play Auburn?
I still think that Auburn is going to, if that scenario comes, I actually don't think it will come. I think Auburn will make it from some of the stuff I've read.
You know what is interesting is that Penn State lost to
Minnesota.
Ohio State. Or no, they beat Ohio State like in the regular season, which is exactly what Auburn did to Oregon. Penn State beat Ohio State. Ohio State went on to win the Big Ten championship, and Ohio State got into the playoff. I think a lot of people might look at Oregon, might look at week 1. That was such a long time ago. Oregon's been undefeated. If they're dominant, they have the extra data point with a Justin Herbert. I could see Oregon. I think that'll be an extremely close vote. And if I were in the committee, it would be a very difficult decision.
I think the difference, though, that you're making a good comparison, but at the same time, it's not even close to the same one right there, is because Auburn still will have the number 1 strength of schedule in the nation. Auburn's in a gauntlet right now. If they were to come out of that schedule with only 2 losses, it's not like Oregon, who got to play a lot of these, got to play in Nevadas each week. You know, these cupcakes in the Pac-12. You know.
Do you think that
Oregon
Florida has to finish well, right? They should, like, if Florida shouldn't lose to Missouri, that might affect Auburn actually.
Yeah, I would say it does and it doesn't. I think Auburn is basically at this point, I don't think anything other than winning the games against Alabama and Georgia really, at this point, are going to matter. I don't think that they're going to be looking at Florida and say if Florida lost to Missouri. You know, I think it comes down to what happens from here on out. That being said, I don't think that Auburn's going to win two games against these 2 teams.
I think that Auburn this week, I'm going to say it right now, Auburn's beating Georgia this week, and then if Tua isn't that healthy, I think Auburn has a wonderful chance because at Jordan-Hare, I mean, a couple of years ago with Jarrett Stidham, they beat an amazing – actually, the Georgia – I think that, if I'm not mistaken, Auburn actually beat the 2 teams that played in the national championship. Is that correct? In Georgia and Alabama, the year that happened?
I think you're right.
Yeah. So Auburn absolutely can do this because their defense is that good. One thing I'll say about Auburn, they lost 23-20 at LSU. Clearly LSU, I think it was LSU's toughest test was maybe you could say Auburn. I don't know. Actually, Bo Nix was so poor, but you could argue that. And
I think what's going to hurt Auburn if Tua is healthy again. Honestly, I don't think that the Tua healthy thing is necessarily going to matter against Alabama. I think Tua will be healthy enough to play that game, but I don't. Here's the thing about Auburn. I think they can win this weekend. I think that the reason they'll struggle against Alabama, I still haven't seen anyone that can stop Alabama, from scoring a lot of points. Last week, what stopped Alabama? Tua dropping the ball on the ground on a run. Tua just kind of being shaky in the first half, and then the second half he just lights it up. Okay, LSU beat them. So what? All right. Here's the thing, though. Bo Nix has been bad. I mean, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, other than like one real comeback win against Oregon, Bo Nix has not been good. So you could say, well, Alabama, their defense isn't good. I would agree with you. But I don't think Bo Nix is good enough to really expose Alabama's defense for not being good for what it is. Like, if you're expecting to run the ball in Alabama with no real passing threat, good luck. I mean, just
yeah, but
just
I
good
don't
luck.
think Alabama's D is going to necessarily be incredible at Auburn in that environment.
But you've got to realize something, though. Good luck to the guy who can't throw the ball. The guy is a complete one-read quarterback. You're talking about the difference of what you're trying to compare right here. It's like trying to compare last week and Joe Burrow just tearing apart Alabama's defense. It has nothing to do with Bo Nix. Has zero, because Bo Nix has none of those options. Auburn is going to have to run the ball.
If Tua can play and put up some points, maybe it'll put some pressure. I mean, Bo Nix, he doesn't have – the problem is
awful.
like Nick Marshall would be a good comparison to Bo Nix, but Nick could really run the ball. And then you had Trey Mason, who was a Heisman candidate. He was fantastic. So
your number one running back is out for the year.
Yeah, and Boobie Whitlow.
I'm not a big fan, but he's still.
I still think it's going to be hard though to beat Auburn if the defensive line is boasting, and
I
think
it
really gets interesting.
Another underrated loss for Auburn. Remember this, another underrated loss for Auburn right now. We talked about Bo Nix. Joe Gatewood's gone now. He's entered the transfer portal, and you can say, well, what does that do? Well, there are gimmicky packages in the red zone where they've, tried to, even if it's not him running the ball, you have to account for him. That's
gone. I'm not
gone.
missing Gatewood at all. He's too big of a distraction.
Yeah, I think you realize
too
that.
big of a distraction.
That's a dumb statement. That's a dumb statement because on plays that weren't touchdowns, the run. It was a 9.1 per yard running game average on plays that weren't touchdowns with Gatewood in the game. So that's a dumb statement because he has gotten them the rushing yards, whether it's Gatewood rushing the ball or it was Whitlow or other guys. So don't say they're not going to miss him.
Right.
Because he obviously will be missed.
Personality, though. If Joey's halfway in, halfway out. Also, the locker room. Here's the thing. Bo Nix is not a finished product by any means. But this fan base,
no, I hope not. It's not good.
This fan base was complaining that Bo Nix was left in the game against LSU, and that could not do well for a psyche of an 18-year-old kid, and it also doesn't do well for the psyche of a head coach that is not exactly out of the weeds. So I believe for Bo Nix and actually Gus Malzahn, it's going to lift. It's a burden having the pressure of Gatewood. Just like for Jake Fromm, he would definitely admit this privately, I believe, if you gave him truth serum, that Justin Fields was not good for him either.
Well, then, I'll take Jake Fromm from last year compared to this year. So it's a completely, utterly ridiculous comment, too, because Jake Fromm was lights out last year.
I love it. What do you think if
Georgia
that's
utterly ridiculous? It's like you saying that Baker Mayfield is better than Lamar Jackson 2 weeks ago on your show.
But you don't want to have too good of a backup quarterback. That's always been my philosophy. That's why in the NFL, that's why you don't want to have too much of a backup quarterback.
Yeah, you don't want Nick Foles to be able to step in when your guy gets hurt. You're right. Keep going.
How do you think Carson Wentz was doing with the shadow of Nick?
I think it didn't affect him at all. How about that? Yeah, I think these guys. I think that when you're out there playing a game, it doesn't affect you. I don't think that when the guy's blitzing you in the middle of a play, that Bo Nix is thinking about Joey Gatewood on the sideline. I think he's worried about getting the ball out and realizing that he's the worst blitz quarterback in the entire nation. I don't think that has anything to do with Joey Gatewood, but
also Bo Nix, he doesn't have a lot of great receivers. I mean, Slayton got out, and
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that Bo Nix not very good,
Well, first of all,
we can make excuses for Bo.
But Bo Nix also played at the Swamp and at LSU, so I think that any quarterback's going to struggle.
Yeah, and also the other games he has not been very good. Like he'll tear apart like Arkansas. Good job, Bo. Let's give a round of applause for Bo. You beat up Arkansas.
First-year kid. I mean, he was the guy.
He could barely beat what's his name, the Ole Miss running Rebels. So it's interesting. I don't think that they're going to win the next 2 games. That's basically what I'm saying. I don't think they're good enough.
Okay.
They haven't
if Georgia
shown
beats
to be
LSU and loses to Auburn, what happens to Georgia?
Well, if Georgia loses to Auburn and beats LSU, Georgia is done.
Georgia's still done. I would agree because Georgia's looked awful all year, even against Kentucky.
Georgia's done because of they lost the game basically to a third-string quarterback because Kolinsky wasn't even in at the end of the game. Georgia is a very interesting case in the sense of if you look at basically all their games this year, they've basically played, except for like Ian Book and maybe like week 1, whoever they beat up week 1, and they played against literally all backup quarterbacks. Every team that they have played has been a backup quarterback, and it's amazing when you think about it. So this week against Auburn will be the first time that they've played a starting quarterback since Ian Book.
Yeah, and their strength of schedule isn't that good, but that win against LSU is going to do them wonders.
Well, I mean, if they lose this week, they're done either way. If they win this week and they beat LSU, they're going to be in the playoff. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
I don't think that this team is. I'll put it this way. I think Auburn can beat this team because I don't think the team is good. I don't think that this team even has a chance against LSU because I think this team, it's like it reminds you of the version. Because I don't want to. I'm not trying to take anything away from what's it called, Minnesota, but it reminds me a little bit of Minnesota that they're kind of on the right side of the bracket in the sense of and that they've had like one good win, and that they. But I'm not trying to make this a Minnesota argument, but it's like they have one good win against Florida, kind of you would say a la Penn State, but they still haven't played the big boy in Ohio State yet, in a sense where it would be LSU, and then I think that jump from Penn State to Ohio State's a big one. I think the jump from Florida to LSU is a huge one,
I think that this game against Auburn will show us a lot about
I just don't think Georgia's very good. I don't care if Georgia wins this weekend. I don't think they're good at all.
Defense might be able to stop LSU in that game, actually.
Yeah, but we don't even know that because basically what we found out about Georgia, they were able to stop Notre Dame. I'll give them a lot of credit for that, but what have they done this year? They have stopped all second-string quarterbacks.
Well,
they haven't even played these teams when they're healthy.
The game against Florida was absolutely a beat. They had that thing wire to wire.
Once again, backup quarterback.
Yeah, but
I don't even care what your opinion is.
Your
opinion is the fact that
you really think Franks would have played better than Kyle Trask.
I think Franks is the better quarterback. Yes, he
Franks
basically
lost to Georgia
Trask has not been good.
But here's the thing about that South Carolina game is that South Carolina had no snaps in the red zone in regulation. So it was an anomaly that they lost the football game. And Jake Fromm had his worst game that you could say against Will Muschamp. It was a horrible, inexcusable game. And I'm not saying Georgia's offense is that good, but Georgia's definitely different than Minnesota. They've proven that they can be an elite program. And the LSU game, this week we'll learn everything we need to know. Georgia's defense has to be lights out for them to win because Jake Fromm is not producing at the same level.
I agree. It's going to be interesting. I think Auburn does win this game, but Georgia can. I think that the LSU match will be just too much when they do get into the championship game.
So Auburn, 2 losses again. So if Minnesota loses to Ohio State, then Oregon, Utah, Oklahoma, Baylor, all those teams are getting in over Minnesota.
Minnesota has no outlet other than beating Ohio State, 0.
How do you think that they do against Iowa?
I'll even give you another one where they have 0 outlet other than going undefeated, because this one has been talked about on the radio too. Say they lose to Iowa or Wisconsin, right? And then somehow they go out and beat what's it called?
Ohio State.
Ohio State. They're not going to make the playoff either, though. Ohio State will probably still make it over them. They have to go undefeated,
Minnesota?
Minnesota, yes.
But how could you? I mean,
How did you keep them out?
Because Minnesota would have beaten Ohio State heads up.
I'm just saying, because then they would have lost to a team that's worse than. So then they will have a 1 loss, right? And then what's going to happen? The Pac-12 can get in, and then it's either going to be Ohio State. And say if you kill Ohio State, then it's either going to be Ohio State or it's going to be Alabama. Minnesota is not jumping that unless they go undefeated.
No, but if Minnesota
because
loses,
Alabama's
if they lose
loss
to Iowa and beat Wisconsin and Ohio State, the Big Ten champ is getting in.
They're not making the playoff.
They're
not making the playoff. I promise you that.
Oregon,
you're just too much of a fan. Once again, I'm trying to give you a scenario that it's an out there scenario. I promise you they won't make the playoff in that one.
Minnesota would have better wins, though. They would have beaten Ohio State, like Wisconsin and Penn State, as opposed to Oregon, who doesn't beat anybody, Alabama, who doesn't beat anybody. Ohio State
I'm telling you what it is. I'm telling you what it is. I've listened to these people,
to the committee.
Ohio State would then be looked at as their 1 loss to Minnesota wouldn't be as bad as Minnesota's 1 loss to say Iowa or Wisconsin.
I gotcha. No, I get it.
Yeah.
I was just pushing back there.
Yeah. No, I know. Believe me.
It would be
I've heard all
very
these scenarios all week.
to beat Ohio State and not get into the playoff. It would be.
Believe me. Believe me, I get it. Believe me, I don't think you have to worry about that, to be 100% honest. Unfortunately,
this Iowa game is going to be brutal. Going to Iowa, I think it'll obviously be close. And then Wisconsin, even Northwestern, there's no games that are gimmies, but that's what makes
let's put it this way. I think Wisconsin's a harder game than the Iowa game. I think that Wisconsin's a harder game, even though I think Iowa's a very tough game. I think Wisconsin's just it's a different beast again,
And at least it's at Minnesota, and at least Minnesota.
It's at Minnesota. It's a controllable environment, which is very good.
And Minnesota did beat them last year.
No, you're 100% right. It's controllable environment compared to Iowa, which is not as controllable,
Yeah, Iowa, Kinnick Stadium is just dangerous. It's where dreams go to die sort of place. And Iowa's always where they need to be. They're a team that doesn't beat themselves and all the Iowa cliches. And they're a great team. I have respect for kind of how they run. I do have respect for how they run their program. They haven't evolved on offense as much as I would have liked. Like, imagine if they evolved even a tad. They could have been really special,
Oh, I agree.
If they evolved. But, Dave, man, it's been fun. Before we go, let's talk about a little bit about last night, and then we can we'll do a lot of NFL. I guess we're going to do NFL in college tomorrow morning, man, if you're still down.
I am awake, yeah.
You are still down. So Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph. Mason grabbed Myles Garrett. A lot of people are biased. They're either Steelers fans. They either hate Mason Rudolph for not apologizing at the post-game press conference. I think Rudolph has taken a ton of hate online. I think factually, if you look at people on Twitter, which is, Twitter is the most biased place ever, though, I think that Mason Rudolph's taken a lot of flack today.
Here's my opinion on it. And I texted you earlier, and I'll say it for the air, obviously. Mason Rudolph, did he attempt to take Myles Garrett's helmet off? Yes. That happens if you look at it at least, probably in 8 to 10 games each NFL week where someone tries to take someone's helmet off. They're either unsuccessful or it happens, and it's a penalty, right? The difference is, okay, so everyone's saying, Mason Rudolph started it. I actually disagree. I think it starts with Myles Garrett, who got an unnecessary roughness penalty on that play, which gets completely forgotten about at this point. That he initially got the rough in the passer penalty, but no one even talks about that at this point. He takes Rudolph, drives him to the ground. So Rudolph reacts, tries to take his helmet off, unsuccessful. And then Myles Garrett, pulls his helmet off. Okay. Then everyone's wailing and punching at it, and then, Mason Rudolph tries to confront him. God knows what was said or wasn't said, on the bottom of that pile. At that point, though, when you have – I don't care. I've seen guys take people's helmets off before. It's not that uncommon. Where it's not common is for Myles Garrett just to start wailing his helmet onto someone. That's not common. I've never seen that before. No one's seen that before. So, to even listen to people tell me that, Mason Rudolph started it and, kind of had it coming with him trying to take Myles Garrett's helmet off is utterly ridiculous because I see this every week in college football, in the NFL, where people take someone's helmet off, they try to take someone's helmet off, and it just doesn't happen. But when the helmet comes off, it never turns into, the guy beats the guy over the head with the helmet. So, to me, it's a non-starter.
The analogy is like bumping into someone at a bar and then getting a bottle just tossed on your head. I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong, Smith. I see this so often when guys go after each other's helmets, but you don't see someone trying to hit someone with their helmet. It ends. No.
Garrett, it's stupid. It was a bad decision.
It's indefensible. It's really indefensible what he did to Mason Rudolph, taking it to that level. I think it'll be a 6-game suspension. What I think Haynesworth's suspension was 5 games for similar.
Well, they came out with a suspension already.
It's the rest of the year?
It's indefinite, which is definitely the rest of the year and then possibly into next.
Yeah, I think, and then they'll debate it. I think he'll probably play next year, though.
I think my personal opinion is they went indefinite so that way, because Myles Garrett's appealing to the suspension. I think the only reason he's appealing is to get a concrete number, Right. I think that they're going into next year. My personal opinion, I think it could be somewhere around 14 games, and then with the appeal, maybe it gets knocked down to 10 to 12 games, And where I come up with these numbers is 6 for this year, right? 14, where you say, well, where you come up with that number, that's 8 for next year. If you knocked it down, maybe the first 4 next year. I think he's going to serve a suspension into next year at some point. I don't think it's a full year, obviously. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
It's bizarre. I don't think he should be
the first 4 games of next year.
Yeah, I don't necessarily, I agree. I think it should be 6, but, at the end of the day, they left it very, very open-ended to the point where I could see it going to 14 to 10, 10 to 14 games,
No, and you have to set a precedent that this is, obviously unacceptable. But, Dave, this podcast was a lot of fun. Spoke a lot about college football. And tomorrow we'll talk some NFL and we'll do the picks, man. I had a great time on the pod.
We'll do the picks. Hopefully we don't throw any picks, though. No pick sixes.
That's right. Pick 6 Hicks.
All right. Sounds good, man. I'll talk to you later.
All righty, bud. Thanks so much. All right, guys. Take care. And we are out. Take care, guys.